Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Very important session today, cybersecurity. Important topic all the time, but extra important at the moment with the changed working conditions that a lot of people are experiencing working from home. We've got a special guest to present today, Nick Devidas from Rock IT. Rock IT are our IT support company that handle all our issues and help us ensure that we're set up and secure and doing all the things that we should be doing. So I won't take up any more time. I'll hand over to the expert, to Nick. So thanks, Nick. Take it away.
Thanks, Ben. Oh, thanks, Ben. Hope everyone can hear me. Ben, can you give me a thumbs up? Hear me?
Gotcha.
All right. Excellent. I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Ben, give me another thumbs up if you can see that. Excellent. Well, look, good afternoon, everyone. For those who haven't seen this presentation or met me before, this will be a bit of new content for you to take away. And for those who have seen this presentation before or parts of it, it's a good refresher because you can never actually remember a lot of this stuff. So what I'm going to go through today are some real world examples, some that you would have seen before, some that you might not have seen before, and then some really simple practical steps to ensure that you, as a personal level and also in the business sense, are not low-hanging fruit in the eyes of a cyber criminal. But first, I want to start off with a story. If this will move along, there it is. So normally when I'm presenting face-to-face, I'll get a show of hands of who knows who this gentleman is. But this is Abacha Tunde, who was Nigeria's first astronaut. And he went up into space with the Soviets in the late 80s. And when the Soviet Union broke up, the Russians brought their astronauts home, but they didn't bring Abacha home. They actually left him in space, and he was left in space for 15 years. And he was accruing flight pay as this was all going along. And the Nigerian government then started reaching out to people to help bring him back. And so it required a certain amount of funds to make that happen. So the Nigerian government actually reached out to me directly, and they said if I could forward them $20,000 to help cover the costs of some legal fees, then I'd get a share of his $15 million worth of flight pay. And so I sent them $20,000. And I'm still waiting today to find out whether when I'll get my share of the $15 million. So I can see from a few smirks on cameras there, you can probably guess that is, I didn't actually do that, but it is probably my favorite internet scam that I've seen going around. This is what's known as an advanced fee scam, and they typically look like this. So an email that gives you big dollar numbers. There'll be a share, 50%, 50 for you, for me, 50 for you. Identity must not be revealed to anyone. And there's always a strange sort of message surrounding why you need to send some money to this person before you can get a share of the much larger amount. The other thing I like to do when we're face-to-face is do a simple test. And that test typically involves me talking to the person next to me saying, can you hand over your phone to me? And so the person will hand over the phone, and that phone is typically unlocked. Then I'll ask the next person, can you unlock your phone, and then hand me the phone? And just a very simple test to show just how easy it is for people to hand over credentials, to unlock a phone, to make it a lot easier for me to steal the information off their phone. It doesn't work so well when I'm talking to a bunch of muted people in a Zoom session, but you can sort of get the idea. But there are some psychological components behind why we get fooled so easily. And it's because scams, especially cyber scams, they're not exploiting technological vulnerabilities, they're exploiting human vulnerabilities. So when people start to see the prospect of winning money, romance, or in the case of that example that I gave, handing over the phone, the fear, anxiety, and panic of getting into trouble from someone standing up in front of you saying, can you hand your phone to me? They don't want to be seen as, I'm not participating in this activity. people will just do what you ask them to do. It comes down to these sorts of things called visceral factors, and they're states that influence how much goods and actions are valued. So the best example, if you have children or young children, when they get hungry, they go into a certain state. And it is pretty much like this. All they can think about when they're hungry is, I need to eat, I need to eat, I need to eat. And so when people get into these sorts of modes, they start making what a rational person would see as being very irrational decisions. So you'll see cases where, supposedly very intelligent people, be it doctors, lawyers, professors, falling for scams purely because they get into a particular state. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that humans are tribal people, and we didn't evolve to live in a world of strangers. Hundreds of years ago, if you lived in a village or an equivalent, you would have known everyone back to front, who lives next door to you. You'd know their parents, their grandparents. There's a long history. The world wasn't as big as it is today. And so we have a default tendency to believe other human beings. So when someone says, hey, I'd really like you to do this, you typically say, yep, sure, I know you. I've had a long history with you. I trust that your actions are aligned to my values. Whereas now we're being asked to transact with people all across the world. Yep, I'll hand over $100,000 for whatever it is that I've just purchased, and I trust that you're going to do the right thing in return, when in fact, that is something that can be exploited. So why are scam emails written so poorly? This is a good example of a terribly written email, and everyone says, if they just fix up their grammar and they made it look more believable, then surely they'd pick up more victims. And the answer to that is they would. But scammers know that if you fall for a poorly worded email, then you are more likely to part with your money. And the reason for that is it's really cheap to send out 1 million emails, because it's the same email which has been pumped out 1 million times. But the cost in terms of labor effort for a scammer to have to reply one-on-one and build a relationship and try and exploit money, where have we gone, out of someone is actually really labor intensive. So they really want to qualify out everyone who might at some point opt out of their scam. Hence, if you fall for an email that is as poorly worded as this, you are far more likely to actually part with your money. So there actually is a really impressive reason behind why they're written in such a way. The other thing is, humans are very good at protecting against physical and unlikely events. Now, obviously these slides were put together before coronavirus, and I'm really still not quite sure how to fit coronavirus into this, because we're not really through it yet. But these are pictures of the Brisbane floods. Highly unlikely event. It is actually a 1 in 100 year event. And what happened in between those two enormous flood periods was that data centers were obviously brought into the Brisbane CBD in the last 20 years. And a lot of that infrastructure was actually put below ground, which is uncommon for a city, especially one that could potentially flood. So the reaction against these floods was hundreds of millions of dollars was taken to move that infrastructure from below ground facilities to above ground facilities. Yet the actual likelihood of that event occurring again, and this is taken from the Brisbane City Council's document on the event, it is actually in that medium likelihood area of a 1 in 100 year event. So we're really good at guarding against 1 in 100 year events, especially physical based ones, because we know and feel the pain. It's kind of like going and getting a helmet for a bike. You know and you understand that if you fall off your bike, you could have physical damage done to you. Where coronavirus fits into this, I'm actually unsure. It might actually be a high likelihood that this continues on for years, or the next pandemic can actually spread quite quickly. So we'll see how that pans out. But in terms of likelihood, how likely a cyber attack is, winning the lottery is a 1 in 175 million chance event. Even being attacked by a bear is 1 in 2.7 million. But we're very acutely aware, especially shark attacks, 3.7 million, having your tax return audited 1 in 100, yet the likelihood of a cyber attack is actually 1 in 4. And you're getting these cyber attacks with all the spam email that you're getting. That is, you responding to that or not deems whether you fall into this category. So you've got to know how to protect yourself against what's coming into your inbox. In terms of the research, this is a 2017 report by Google. A phishing attack, which is an email that is sent to a person and aims to trick you into doing something, is far more efficient than actually trying to brute force attack their way into a computer system. So if you hand over information, that is far easier for the cyber criminals, hence why we get so much spam email and they're trying so hard to do that. Much easier to do that. In terms of the numbers, this is the data breaches from the last quarter that were reported to the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. As per the most recent update to the Privacy Act in 2018, you are now obliged to report any data breach occurrence. And you'll note that of the 242 notifications, 36% were deemed as human error, around 60% malicious or criminal attacks, and 5% system faults. Of that 60 or 59% of malicious or criminal attacks, only 10% were targeted hacking, movie style targeted attacks. The rest were human initiated. So human error is I've sent an email to the wrong person with someone else's contract or their personal information, something like that. Social engineering, lost credentials, malware, and ransomware are all initiated by a human. So they've clicked on a website or clicked on an email that has then downloaded information, or they've given information away as a result of that. So a huge proportion of all data breaches are initiated by a human. If you don't respond to that email or don't click on anything, you won't have a data breach. So how does it work? We'll flick through this one pretty quickly, but a hacker will target a company or an individual and use different social networks and internet data to find the employees who are more than likely going to give them access to a system. The attacker will identify people that the employee may know, so friends of friends, set up a fake but recognizable email to impersonate. That personalized email is then sent to the target. So it might be they found a picture on Facebook that they went away for a weekend somewhere. They set up a fake friend email address and say, hey, how was your weekend away? So it makes it look really believable. The email passes all spam filters and arrives at the employee's inbox. The email is open because they think they know who that person is, and they say, okay, cool, thanks for looking at my pictures on Facebook or whatever. A link or an attachment is open, and one of two things falls out of that. Either they go to a website and they put in their credentials into a malicious website, or the open attachment installs something onto their computer. And then the hacker uses that information to steal information. And it may be actually a multi-level attack where they want to get to a middle manager to use that middle manager's information to then get to an executive, something like that. When we're looking at security and how to secure systems, there's always this balancing act between convenience and security. And it tends to be the more secure that a solution is, the less convenient it is. And the way to describe that is to look at a house. Everyone agrees that knowing no door is the easiest way to get in and out of your house. No barriers, you just walk in and out as you please, but you also have the stray dogs and the wind and the rain, everything coming in. So you put a door on. But then you can start adding different elements to your security. You could have locks on the doors, you could have a gate, you could have a security guard. But an attacker just needs to find a hole in one part of that whole defense mechanism. It could be the door that you forgot to lock. It could be the cracked window that you forgot to replace, or the hole in the fence. Any area like that, a robber in this case can sneak in, and all of a sudden they've got access to your home. This is the exact same thing that happens in a computer network. If you have a poor password, if you leave your computer unlocked and walk away from it, that's all an attacker needs. one entry point, and they've got access into the network. So why is cybersecurity important? So PwC in 2015 identified that cyber risk is more than an IT issue. It's a business issue. That's because there's the obvious costs of financial if you're accidentally sending money to the wrong place. There's reputational damage that could occur. You could do damage to your customers, not only yourself. And ASIC is putting company directors under increased scrutiny. And to save you having to read a 160-page document on this, this is the key point, that your approach to cyber resilience should be proportionate to the risks you face and the nature, scale, and complexity of your business. So you, as a basketball association or organization, need to think about the types of data that you hold on ultimately your players or registered people or members. And so if you have people's home addresses, if you have their date of birth, even those two things alone, if you call up your bank and they say, all right, I need to identify you, what are the two things that they're going to ask you? It is your date of birth, your home address. So if you're keeping that sort of information on your anyone registered within your system, you need to think about how you're protecting that data, which is really important. And it could go, further than that. You might have mobile numbers, you might have a whole heap of information on these people. So where is it stored? Who has access to it? What are the things you need to do to better protect that data? We also need to understand who the cyber criminals are. So typically, they're adolescents looking for a rush. Adolescents tend to have no moral compass. It's the modern day equivalent of going and graffitiing a train or a wall. Their motivations for doing this are unlikely to be monetary. It's all just about notoriety. That's really hard to combat. There are obviously the professional companies with 24/7 support. They do drive-by attacks rather than doing targeted attacks, and their motivations are most certainly monetary. And when they steal your information, this is what it's going for on the underground markets. And I'll give a few more examples of this a bit later, or as to why people want this information. So who are the hackers? If you type the word hacker into Google, these are the sorts of cool images you'll get. People with masks on, hoodies, and a lot of matrixy type graphics going on. Whereas in reality, this is what hackers look like. This is an 18-year-old young man in the UK who pulled off a hack on a telco that cost that telco over £200 million by stealing that information. He had no real clue as to why he was doing it, or he just wanted to do it to impress some friends. But they're real world people hiding away in their homes, and a lot of the time they're underage kids doing this. And how easy has it become? You used to have to know a lot about computer systems to pull off a sophisticated hack or send out a phishing campaign. This product is called Carmen. You can buy Carmen for $150, and you can then spend another $100 odd buying an email database, and you can load it into this system. You can see that this actually looks very much like a CRM. You load your clients up, you can track your payments, you can see how much you've earned at any point in time. You can see a list of everyone who has received your email and what sort of exploit they've downloaded as part of your email. And this is the sort of thing that they will see on their screens. This is a ransomware product, which you may be aware of, where you download a bit of software, it encrypts or locks all the files on your computer. And the only way that you can unlock that is paying a ransom fee to the attacker, and then they will unlock your files, maybe. Most of the time they will, apparently, but sometimes it doesn't work. So $150 is all it costs to become a ransomware distributor, which is pretty scary. So where do we start? There's a couple of key things that everyone needs to be on top of. With kids being educated from home, it's actually a good place to start with kids, especially in the area of understanding why usernames and password combinations are critical. So we use this as an example. Pretend my username is my Gmail account, which that is not my Gmail account, and my password is awesome password, which is also not my password. But let's say I use that same username and password combination across these 4 sites. because it's convenient for me to do that because I can't remember 4 passwords, especially 4 really strong passwords. The problem with this is if one of these systems get hacked, in the case of Sony, they did get hacked, they hold a whole heap of information on me: birth date, mobile phone number, address, but they also have my password. So in the event that Sony gets hacked and my details are in there, that database is then sold on the black market. Someone buys that database, and then they can just log on to all my other systems automatically that use that same username and password combination. And you may have actually been aware that Disney Plus was hacked within hours of it going live. And it was able to be hacked so quickly because so many people had reused their usernames and passwords. So whatever the original hack was, who knows? But then someone just went, right, I'm going to see if the new Disney platform, if people have signed up with the same username and password. And it turns out tens of thousands of people had. Password hygiene. This is another massive document that really just needs to be distilled down to this one point about how to choose a password. A password needs to be impractical for someone else to guess or otherwise discover the correct secret value, which means not your birth date, not your kid's birth date, not your dog's name, not anything that anyone would ever be able to find out in any way, shape or form. It has to be completely made up. So don't be predictable. You can check out the website haveibeenpwned.com and you can put your email address in and it will tell you whether your email address has been in a hack of any sort. And 9 times out of 10, it probably has. Don't iterate passwords. In fact, the general consensus is now you don't need to change your password. So those old policies of change your password every 90 days, no, just have a really good password in the first place. The next one is to have different passwords for each account. Great idea to get kids into this as a rhythm from their starting point because they don't have many online accounts yet. People don't want to go and change all their online accounts because we have so many online accounts. In fact, the average person now has over 140 online accounts. And that's a mixture of systems that you currently use and systems that you used to use. But the systems you used to use, if you have the same password there and that gets compromised, that doesn't help you. So in order to do this process properly, you've actually got to go back through any system that you may have used in the past and change that password. The reason why it's hard to remember so many passwords is there's this thing called the forgetting curve. After 20 minutes of learning something, you'll only retain 60% of that information. And after 9 hours, less than 40%. And it just gets worse from there. And that's not us being old or anything. That is just humans trying to take in as much information as we can. Let's have a look at some good password examples. Monkey is a very, very commonly used password, so don't use that. That'll get broken immediately. Password spelled a little bit differently, could be broken very quickly. And where we want people to start moving is to passphrases. So for the systems that you need to remember the password for, such as a password manager, which we'll get into next, make it something that you can actually remember. So not just a bunch of random digits, make it long. And for everything else, use a password manager, which generates automatic passwords for you. So what it does is you have one account and it has an encrypted database of all your passwords. So all your passwords are locked and only you and your computer can actually unlock that vault full of your passwords. So that means that all the passwords in that vault can be completely different. They can be really long and complex. And so long as you know your master password, and don't forget that, then you can use all of your passwords. It's a very handy system. So people always ask me which ones we use. We use one called LastPass. There's also 1Password and Dashlane. There's quite a few of them. But those are probably the top 3 systems. The benefit of these systems as well is you can lock out people by region. So right now, nobody's traveling. You would lock down your password manager to only be accessible within Australia, or assuming everyone's in Australia here right now, or whatever region you are. Also, when you do end up traveling internationally, you may only ever go to certain countries, so you can allow access during certain time periods when you're in that country. So it's pretty handy. Multi-factor authentication is the next thing that you need to turn on for as many systems that allow it. So that's Gmail accounts, it's your banking system, accounting systems, all that sort of stuff. Multi-factor authentication is something you know, which is your username and password, and something you have, which is your phone. So on phone systems, I'll try and bring mine up and see if everyone can see it, but you've probably seen these sorts of things before. An authenticator with a changing password, and you can see the little countdown clock there. So when I want to log on to a system, I put in my username and password, it then pops up saying, all right, I need a code. And if you're on a trusted computer, being your personal laptop or computer or something like that, most systems will let you be remembered for 30 days. But if there's a new login from a new computer, it will alert you on your primary computer saying, hey, someone is trying to log on to your computer. So the likelihood of someone knowing your username and password is pretty high. The likelihood of them having both your username and password and your phone, which has a separate credential to log on to it, be it fingerprint, your code, or your face recognition, the likelihood of them having both of those things at the same time is very low. Adding something further to multi-factor authentication is something you are. So that's biometrics. That's iris scanning, face recognition, fingerprints, things like that. The other thing we want you to think about is backing up. So backing up is just like investing. If you think of your files as your investment capital, so the money you want to actually invest somewhere, you need to diversify so you don't put all your eggs into one basket. And liquidity is important, meaning it's all very well to have a backup, but the backup is useless to you if you can't actually use it. So the way that plays out is you need to have at least 3 copies of your data. So 1 copy is the copy that you're working on live, and then 2 backups. These 2 backups need to be stored on 2 different types of storage media. So don't just have 2 backups going to the same computer. You want to have one on maybe a hard drive, an external hard drive, and another one possibly going to a cloud-based system or another computer. And one of those copies need to be stored offsite. So the cloud is a great option for that. So now we'll go through some examples. So this is a phishing email. Hopefully it's big enough on everyone's screen to see, but you would have seen these sorts of things. What's our limit on same-day transfers? It looks like it's coming from me and it's sent to our accounts department, but it's got my name, Nick Devidas, but it's got an AOL account, and it was actually sent to 3 different email accounts trying to hit our accounts department. So it's important when you are responding to emails, they're trying to get an executive here, trying to manipulate someone in the finance department to strike up a conversation. And that seems like a non-threatening type request. So what's our limit? And what they're really wanting there is the accounts department to reply back saying it's $20,000, and then magically there'll be a $19,000 transaction request that needs to be made immediately to an unknown bank account. This is a fun one. Can anyone, actually it's going to be hard for you to tell me what you can see is wrong with this. But if you look closely enough, that's not microsoftonline.com. It's actually an R and an N really close together. But when it comes through your email system, that's a hard one to pick up. But a lot of people pick that up on screen. Very few people can pick up the difference between these 2 URLs. And I'll save you the suspense. One of those L's is actually a capitalized I. And so this is a real world example that we saw play out for a company that wasn't our client and now is our client, who had their email systems hijacked. What happened was an executive within a mining company fell for a phishing scam, and all they did was click on something and gave away their username and password to their email system. Nothing else happened. And the attackers sat there waiting for email correspondence to occur, and those emails were then pushed out to a third party, to a Gmail account. So they knew something, the mining company knew something fishy was occurring. And our initial advice when they brought us in was turn on multi-factor authentication, which stopped the attackers' access to the mailbox. And then a few weeks went by and they came back to us and said, no, something is still strange here. These email chains are getting hijacked. And because the email forwarding rule was put in place to email the executives' emails out of the system, the email rule survived, even though we blocked access to the account. And what they were doing was they were setting up these fake domains and trying to trick the mining company into, National Coal's not a real business, by the way, into changing the ultimate bank details for these multi-million-dollar transactions. So we ultimately found the forwarding rules and blocked all access and put in place a number of other security measures to make sure that that didn't happen again, which it hasn't. This phishing one, this is a pretty straightforward one. Simple marketing FOMO. You're about to lose access to your account. It's 92% used. Looks like it's coming from Microsoft. It's got Office 365 team there. And that link looks correct. It actually is written correctly. But when you hover over the link, you can see the ultimate destination there is a copywriter's website. And that copywriter's website, it would just be probably a WordPress website that has been hacked. They set up a fake landing page. And this is what the landing page looks like. It's an exact replica of the Office 365 logon page. So what they're trying to get me to do here is give them my username and password from my email account. But if you have a look at the URL, it is microsoft.bank-verify.com. So it's very clever. You've got to be really on the ball when you're clicking on things and you're about to put your credentials in to a system. Just hold up a second and check the URL. And if it just smells fishy, close the window. You've done no damage at this point. Once you hand over your username and password, you have done damage. But keeping in mind, if you had multi-factor authentication in place, even if you gave away your username and password at this point, they wouldn't be able to get into your Office 365 account. But if you've reused that password and an email account in other systems, they will then be attempting to log on to all of those systems very quickly. Social engineering, this is a far more common practice thing now. But one of our clients, their supplier was compromised, and the attackers started using the supplier's email account to change bank account details. Our clients verified with a new email, thinking they were doing the right thing, saying, yep, just want to confirm you're changing your bank account from this to this. They get a legitimate email, seemingly, back from the correct email address saying, yep, that's what we want to do. So they start paying tens of thousands of dollars into a different bank account. The supplier then calls up and says, why have you stopped paying your invoices? We thought that we had a great relationship. And our client says, well, here's a track record of all the bills we've been paying to this new Swedish bank account, not your HSBC one. And as it turns out, the supplier was compromised, and they didn't actually know that all their invoices were now being paid into a different bank account. This is a very commonplace occurrence. Multi-factor authentication stops that immediately. This is classic brand hijacking. You would have received, these sorts of things before. Stop before you do anything with these sorts of things. Are you with Origin Energy? Set up direct debit for utilities so that even if there is a bill that comes through and it says pay now, you know that you have a direct debit set up with your energy company, for example, and you know that that'll get paid no matter what. I don't think the Commonwealth Bank sends out emails like your password's been disabled, but they're clearly trying to draw people in with these sorts of things. But if you look at the actual email address there, it looks kind of real, acco.co.au, but it's not, clearly not Commonwealth Bank's domain. This is an interesting one. People get these sorts of things all the time saying, is there a virus in the PDF? Now, 9 times out of 10, there's not a virus in the PDF because they're trying to get you to click on a link. So the PDF bypasses the spam filter, but when you double click and open the PDF, it is a real PDF, but in there it's saying, we want you to click on this to download, the end document. And if you have a look at what that link is there, it's going to a strange website. So going over the basics. 1, think twice before clicking on email links and attachments. It's as simple as that. If it looks fishy, If you weren't expecting it, just don't do anything with it. Install software updates when they become available. Software updates, be it on your phone or your computer, always have security enhancements. Use unique passwords per account. Use a passphrase. Use two-factor authentication and use a password manager to help you manage those passwords. Understand your backup strategy. We have walked into too many organizations where backup systems have just not been working at all. People have vans turning up, taking tape drives off site. We've checked the tapes and there's nothing on the tapes. And they've had these systems in place for years. Need to understand it. And a backup strategy includes test restores. You also need to implement technology safeguards. So those are things like firewalls, antivirus, anti-malware software, link protection, all of those sorts of things are really important. So the closing thoughts, always weigh up. There's always a balancing act between security and convenience. Sure, putting in a code every time you log in is inconvenient, but it's better to have that level of security. And believe it or not, Nigeria does have a space agency, and that is their logo, which is ultra cool. But if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So if you want to stay up to date with our cybersecurity news, we have a LinkedIn company page, our blog site, which is rockit.cloud/insights, has got tons of new content coming out all the time. We also have a newsletter that sends out the highlights of those. So probably back over to you, Ben, if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Nick. That was a really great session. A lot of learnings there for everyone, I'm sure. Sometimes your heart skips a beat when you go over and talk about things like passwords and you think about your own situation and how you might have put yourself at risk. So some good things to follow up on. I just wanted to touch on quickly the comment there about the emails, advising accounts that they've changed bank accounts. Finding it really common. Obviously, me being a finance person, seeing it more and more. A standard policy that we've put in place is to, when we get a request to change bank accounts, we actually don't, use any. We have a standard policy to call the company and ask them to confirm their bank account. So we don't look at any link or phone number on the request. We'll look up, their address, their listed phone number, give the accounts department a call and ask them to tell us their bank details. So we won't ask them to confirm because, if it's the wrong person that we're talking to, they're going to tell us that dodgy bank details. So just some really simple things that we've put in place to make sure that we, try and mitigate that risk.
That's a great point, Ben. And also it's worth, for anyone in payroll, if people have a request, if an employee makes a request to change super funds or their bank details, again, either call them. Well, in this environment, you've got to call them. But in a normal environment, walk over to the desk and say, hey, did you actually submit that request?
Yeah, great point. We've got a few questions that we'll just cover off, and I think a lot of it's around the password vault and how that works. But the first one, if your email comes up on "Have I been owned?" or PWNED site, what do you do? Right.
So they're not going to tell you the password that's associated with that. So the guy who set up that website is an Australian guy called Troy Hunt, who is a good guy. He just goes and finds all of the stolen databases that are available and stitches them all together. So you've got to, it'll tell you which breach it occurred in, for example. So if you have a Yahoo account, well, that was, I think all Yahoo accounts were breached. If you have a LinkedIn account, LinkedIn was definitely breached. So use the LinkedIn one as an example, because most people have that in a business sense. You need to think about what password do you use for LinkedIn? And if that password is used anywhere else, well, obviously change your LinkedIn password, but change that password remove it from use across all of your systems. Because the minute that username and password is used anywhere else, you're compromised across, potentially, 50, 60 accounts that you've reused that password.
Right. Bit of a general one. If your PC gets hacked, does that automatically mean that they can access passwords?
That is a good question. It depends on what that level of hack means. I mean, if you've got a bit of software in called a keylogger, What it's looking for is, so you'll be typing into websites, usernames and passwords for banking systems and things like that. That's what that sort of system is looking for. If someone is actually visibly logged into your computer at that point in time, I suppose they have access to whatever you have access to. So if the question has more to do with the password vault, if someone hacks into your computer, can they access your password vault? Then the answer is, if they've hacked into your computer and they can operate it the same way that you can, then yes. However, the password managers that I recommended were ones that have multi-factor authentication. So let's say someone is in your computer and they're watching stuff all the time. When your multi-factor authentication token expires, they will need your phone with them to log on and access those passwords. So it's a difficult question to answer because it was sort of a bit of a broad question, but fundamentally, multi-factor authentication gets around a lot of those problems because they need your phone along with your computer.
I think that sort of answers the next one, which is if someone hacks your password vault, can they access all your passwords? But again, as you've just said, they'll need the phone to get around the two-factor security.
Correct. Yep. So you make sure that your password for your password vault is completely different to every other password you've ever used. Just look at items on your desk and stitch together 4 or 5 words and remember that one. Don't write it down on a post-it note either. And if you remember that, then you get access to all of your other passwords. And the process I went through when I did this a few years ago, and I had 250 different sites I had to go through. I just set aside blocks of 10 and I'd go to all those sites. And if you didn't remember what the password was, you press forgot password, it sends you an email. And then you change that password, even for systems that I no longer used anymore. It took about 2 weeks, but I'm now in a good rhythm that every new site I sign up for, I let LastPass generate a password for me. I don't even know what the passwords are. And it syncs across to my phone. So if I need to access those sites on my phone, it just uses LastPass to do it. So it's actually really cool. And LastPass, I'm sure the others do it as well, can also copy and paste your username and password into apps, not just websites.
Good. Not too many others. Just we will share this this webinar. We've recorded it, so we'll send the link out for that. There's a question here around PlayHQ. That's a bit specific. I'll maybe come back to you, Jason, on that one specifically once I follow up with the PlayHQ guys. If there's nothing else, we'll finish up Nick's part there. Nick, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
It's been a really great presentation. I've got a lot out of it myself, and I'm sure other people have too. So thank you so much for giving us your time. For everyone that's still with us, there's just a couple of things that I'll just tick off. Some Rock IT details there. But if you know, Rock IT, as we've said, they're the support company that Basketball Victoria uses for all our IT support. We've found them to be great to deal with. As you've seen, Nick's really knows his stuff. So if you need any help, we certainly recommend the guys get in touch with them. So thank you very much, Nick. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you have a nice day.